The body on Tier C. Before this goes any further, lock in, subscribe, like, comment, because stories like this don't end clean, and once you step inside these walls, there's no turning back. The body was found at 4:17 a.m., slumped against the cold concrete of Tier C, Cell Block Delta. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, flickering like they were about to give up, just like everyone else in that building. Blood had pooled beneath the man's torso, seeping into the cracks of the floor where decades of violence had already stained the concrete a permanent rust color. His orange jumpsuit was torn at the collar, one sleeve half ripped away, as if someone had dragged him across the tier before deciding where he should die. His name was Marcus Reed, inmate number 447129, 36 years old, serving 25 years for armed robbery and felony assault. Inside the prison system, Marcus Reed was nobody special. Outside, no one was waiting for him. But the way he died made one thing clear. This wasn't random, and it wasn't quick. Correctional officers initially called it a stabbing. That was the easy answer. In a place like Redvale Penitentiary, stabbings were as routine as head counts. But when the prison's internal response team rolled Marcus's body onto a goney, something didn't sit right. There were no visible shank wounds. No punctures, no slashes, just deep bruising around his neck and chest, and a look frozen on his face that wasn't pain. It was shock. Marcus Reed hadn't been killed in a fight. He'd been executed. Redvale Penitentiary sat in the middle of nowhere, a concrete fortress surrounded by razor wire and empty land stretching for miles. Officially, it was classified as a maximum security correctional facility. Unofficially, it was known as a warehouse the men the system had given up on. Gangs ran the tiers, corruption ran the schedules, and survival depended on who you answered to when the lights went out. By sunrise, the prison was on lockdown. Inmates were forced back into their cells. Guards lined the tiers with hands resting just inches from their batons. The warden, Thomas Kincaid, stood in the control room staring down at the cell block through bulletproof glass, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. Kincaid had spent 22 years climbing the ranks of the Department of Corrections. He'd seen riots, hangings, mass stabbings, and bodies pulled from cells that reeked of decay. But this was different. Marcus Reed had been under protective custody just 6 weeks earlier. Then, suddenly, his status was changed. No explanation. No paperwork trail anyone could find. That alone raised alarms. By mid-morning, the state was forced to call in outside investigators. Detective Laura Hensley arrived first, her coat still damp from the freezing rain that clung to the prison grounds. She'd worked organized crime for over a decade and had learned one rule early. When violence happens behind bars, it almost always starts somewhere else. Hensley walked Tier C slowly, her eyes scanning every cell door, every camera dome mounted high in the corners. Half of them were dark, broken, or conveniently under maintenance. She crouched near the spot where Marcus Reed had died and noticed something most guards had missed. Scratched faintly into the concrete near the bloodstain were 3 symbols, crude but deliberate. A triangle, a line through it, and a small crown etched above. Gang markings. The Aryan Crown, one of the most violent prison gangs in the country, officially white supremacist. In reality, far more practical. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking, and murder for hire. Race was branding. Money was a mission. But Marcus Reed wasn't Aryan Crown. He wasn't affiliated with any white gang at all. That made no sense. Hensley pulled Marcus's file. His last known association inside Redvale was with a multiracial prison crew known as the Iron Circle, a group that prided itself on staying neutral in racial conflicts. They handled contraband logistics, passed messages between gangs, and quietly controlled entire supply chains without drawing attention. Neutral men didn't die like this unless neutrality had failed. As Hensley reviewed surveillance footage, another red flag appeared. The cameras covering Tier C had gone dark for exactly 11 minutes the night Marcus died. 11 minutes was an eternity inside a prison. Enough time to move a body. Enough time to send a message. Enough time to start a war. When the feed resumed, Marcus was already dead. Guards were questioned one by one. Most stuck to rehearsed answers. They heard nothing, saw nothing, did their rounds as usual. But one officer, a rookie named Daniel Price, hesitated. His hand shook when Hensley asked where he'd been during the blackout. I was reassigned, he said. Control room orders. Orders from who? Price couldn't answer that. Meanwhile, tension inside Redvale was rising fast. Word of Marcus's death spread through the cell blocks like smoke. Iron Circle members stopped talking. Aryan Crown soldiers began marking walls openly, daring anyone to challenge them. The Black Vipers, another powerful gang, pulled their people back, locking down their own tiers like they were preparing for siege. This wasn't retaliation. This was positioning. Hensley met with the prison's intelligence unit that afternoon, but what they offered felt incomplete. Redacted reports, missing logs, informants who had suddenly gone silent. Someone inside Redvale was controlling the flow of information, and they were doing it with confidence. Then came the discovery that shifted the entire case. During a routine sweep of Marcus Reed's former cell, a guard found a loose vent panel behind his bunk. Inside was a folded piece of plastic wrap, sealed tight to protect it from moisture. Written in tiny, cramped handwriting were names. Dozens of them. Inmates, guards, even 2 administrative officials. Next to some of the names were dollar amounts. Next to others were dates. And next to one name, Warden Thomas Kincaid, was a single word written so hard it had torn the plastic. Payment. When Detective Hensley read it, the room went silent. Marcus Reed hadn't been a victim caught in the crossfire. He had been keeping records. And whatever he was about to expose was dangerous enough to get him killed inside one of the deadliest prisons in America. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. Because at the bottom of the list, beneath all the names and numbers, Marcus had written one final line. If I'm found dead, it's already too late. And as Hensley stared at the words, alarms blared through Redvale Penitentiary, echoing off the concrete walls. Another inmate had just gone missing. The prison that fights back. By the time the alarm stopped screaming through Redvale Penitentiary, every instinct detective Laura Hensley had was telling her the same thing. Marcus Reed's death was in the beginning of the story. It was a warning shot. The missing inmate was named Eli Navarro, inmate number 552804, 31 years old, former logistics runner for the Iron Circle. According to intake records, he was last seen entering the shower corridor on Tier B at 6:42 p.m. He never came out. No camera footage, no witnesses willing to speak, and no body. Inside a maximum security prison, people don't just vanish, not without help. Hensley stood in the warden's office as correctional staff scrambled through paperwork and radio chatter. Warden Thomas Kincaid sat behind his desk, hands folded neatly, his expression calm to the point of being unsettling. Lockdowns create chaos, Kincaid said evenly. Inmates take advantage of it. Lockdowns also create cover, Hensley replied, especially when cameras go dark and officers get reassigned without documentation. Kincaid's eyes flicked up for just a second. Too fast, too controlled. By nightfall, Redvale felt like a loaded gun. Gangs had retreated into their territories, but that didn't mean things were quiet. It meant they were planning. Whispers traveled through vents, notes passed under doors, and favors were being called in fast. Hensley pulled Eli Navarro's file and felt the puzzle tightening around her. Navarro wasn't just a runner. He was a connector. He moved contraband between gangs that officially hated each other. Drugs from the Aryan Crown, phones supplied by the Black Vipers, cash funneled through the Iron Circle. Navarro was the grease keeping the entire underground economy running. If Marcus Reed had been keeping records, Navarro likely knew where the rest were hidden. And if Navarro was gone, someone else had found him first. Late that night, a guard patrol discovered something strange near the prison's industrial laundry room. A trail of water leading toward a maintenance hatch rarely used since the 1990s. Inside the hatch was a single item, a prison-issued sandal, snapped clean in half. Navarro's size. The laundry room wasn't monitored. It was considered low risk. Too loud. Too open. That made it perfect. Hensley traced the hatch's layout and realized it connected to an abandoned service corridor that ran beneath the prison, one not listed on updated blueprints. Someone had moved Navarro off the grid, and they'd done it like professionals. As pressure mounted, the first crack appeared from inside the system. Officer Daniel Price requested a private meeting with investigators. This time, he didn't hesitate. "They are paying people," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Not just inmates, guards, supervisors, even transport officers. Price explained that certain inmates were untouchable. They moved freely during lockdowns. They weren't searched. They weren't counted properly. Orders came down verbally, never in writing. Anyone who questioned it was transferred, or was. Marcus Reed knew. Price said, "He told me they were building something bigger than a gang." He said Red Veil was just one piece. That sentence landed hard, because prison gangs didn't usually think long-term. They fought for territory, control, survival. But Marcus had been tracking money, networks, payments that extended beyond the walls. Someone wasn't just running gangs inside Red Veil. They were running an empire. Hensley pushed for federal involvement, but the request stalled. Jurisdictional delays, internal reviews, paperwork purgatory. Meanwhile, inside Red Veil, the balance of power was shifting violently. The Aryan Crown made the first move. 2 Iron Circle members were found beaten nearly unconscious in their cells, faces smashed so badly they were barely recognizable. No weapons, no blood trails, just brute force and a message carved into the wall above them. Records get erased. That same night, a fire broke out in the prison library. By the time it was contained, entire sections of archived inmate files were destroyed. Years of data, gone. Someone was cleaning house. Hensley realized the truth too late. Marcus Reed's list wasn't the only one. There were backups, and whoever controlled Red Veil was hunting them down. The next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A longtime inmate informant known only as Preacher requested protective custody. Preacher had survived 20 years by staying invisible, but now fear had finally broken him. "They are killing accountants," he said. "Anyone who tracks money. Anyone who writes things down." Preacher revealed that a shadow group had formed inside Red Veil, pulling members from every major gang. They didn't fly colors. They didn't claim territory. They answered to one rule only: profit. Guards called them the collective. "They don't care about race," Preacher said. "They care about silence." According to him, Marcus Reed had been compiling evidence to trade for protection. Navarro was supposed to move that evidence out during a medical transport. But someone leaked the plan. Hensley felt her stomach drop. The leak had come from inside the administration. That narrowed the list dramatically. Then the call came in. A body had been found beneath the prison, deep in the abandoned service corridor. They found Eli Navarro zip-tied to a chair, his face swollen and bruised beyond recognition. But he was still alive. Barely. Tubes and wires were hastily attached as paramedics worked to stabilize him. Before losing consciousness, Navarro managed to whisper 4 words: "Don't trust the transfers." Those words followed Hensley into the early hours of the morning, replaying over and over as she reviewed recent inmate movements. Transfers approved without cause. Inmates sent to other facilities. Some never arrived. Officially, they were relocated. Unofficially, they vanished. And then came the discovery that turned the investigation inside out. Hidden in Navarro's medical transport paperwork was a forged authorization stamp. The signature wasn't a guard's. It belonged to Warden Thomas Kincaid. Hensley stared at the document, the weight of it pressing down hard. This wasn't corruption at the edges. This was leadership. Before she could act, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Internal Affairs. Kincaid was gone. His office was empty. His car still parked outside the prison gates. No resignation. No explanation, just a single envelope left behind on his desk. Inside was a copy of Marcus Reed's list. Every name crossed out, except one, Laura Hensley's. And written beneath it, in fresh ink, were 4 chilling words. "You're inside it now." The empire beneath the bars. By the time Laura Hensley realized how deep she was, Red Veil Penitentiary had already closed around her like a trap. Internal Affairs pulled her off the case within hours of Warden Kincaid's disappearance. No explanation. No discussion. Her access badge stopped working. Her emails bounced back unanswered. Officially, she was reassigned. Unofficially, she had become a liability. But the list said otherwise. Hensley sat alone in her motel room that night. Marcus Reed's handwriting burned into her memory. Names crossed out meant people already silenced. Some dead. Others erased through transfers that led nowhere. The pattern was undeniable. The collective wasn't just running Red Veil. They were exporting inmates, laundering bodies through bureaucracy, and using the prison system itself as infrastructure. A criminal empire with bars as camouflage. Eli Navarro survived the night, but barely. Doctors said his injuries were consistent with prolonged interrogation. Whoever had questioned him hadn't been in a rush. They'd wanted names, locations, backup plans, and Navarro had cracked, just not completely. Before sunrise, Hensley broke protocol and visited him in the hospital wing under a false clearance code she'd memoized years ago. Navarro's eye fluttered open when he heard her voice. "They're not gangs anymore," he rasped. "They're supply chains." He explained how the collective controlled drug routes that started outside the prison, flowed through inmate labor programs, and exited via corrupt transport officers. Cell phone coordinated hits on the outside. Guards moved cash. Administrators approved special transfers for anyone who became inconvenient. Red Veil was just a hub. Marcus tried to stop it, Navarro whispered. He thought if he documented everything, someone would listen. His fingers tightened weakly around Hensley's sleeve. They'll burn the whole place before they let that happen. Hours later, Navarro was dead. Cardiac arrest, according to the report. Natural causes, exacerbated by prior injuries. The cameras in the hospital wing malfunctioned at the exact moment it happened. The message was unmistakable. That same afternoon, Red Veil exploded. It started with a fight in the yard, 2 inmates, 1 knife, then another, then alarms, smoke, shouts echoing off concrete walls of coordinated attacks broke out across 3 tiers simultaneously. Aryan Crown members turned on their own. Iron Circle enforcers were stabbed by men they protected for years. Guards were overwhelmed, forced to retreat as doors slammed shut electronically. This wasn't a riot. It was a purge. Hensley listened to the chaos through a scanner in her car parked outside the perimeter fence. Emergency codes flooded the channel. Tactical units were called in. The prison went into full containment. And in the middle of it all, one name surfaced repeatedly. Kincaid. He hadn't disappeared. He had gone underground. Hensley followed the money. Using Marcus Reed's list, she traced shell accounts tied to inmate labor contracts, food suppliers, and private transport companies. All roads led back to a non-profit consulting firm that advised correctional facilities nationwide. Its founder, Thomas Kincaid. The warden hadn't been skimming money. He had been architecting a system where incarceration itself was the product. Inmates weren't just prisoners. They were assets, disposable labor, enforcers. 4 guys. When one talked, they were transferred. When a transfer failed, they vanished. When violence threatened exposure, it was redirected inward. Gang wars weren't failures of control. They were tools. Federal agents finally moved in once the scale became undeniable. Red Veil was raided. Records seized. Guards arrested. Several high-ranking officials were escorted out in handcuffs as cameras rolled. The story broke nationally within hours. Headlines screaming about corruption, criminal enterprises, and a prison system rotting from the inside. But Kincaid was never found. Weeks later, Red Veil reopened under new leadership. New policies, new promises. Officials assured the public the nightmare was over. Hensley knew better. Marcus Reed was officially labeled a victim of inmate violence. Eli Navarro's death was ruled a medical complication. The collective, according to internal reports, no longer existed. But 3 months later, a body was discovered in a minimum security facility 2 states away. The inmate had been transferred from Red Veil. No stab wounds, no gunshots, just deep bruising around the neck and chest. And carved faintly into the concrete beside him were 3 symbols. A triangle, a line through it, a crown. Hensley stood at the edge of the crime scene as a realization settled in, cold and heavy. They thought the empire had collapsed. But empires don't disappear. They adapt. They relocate. They wait. And somewhere behind bars, or far beyond them, the people who built it were still watching, still counting, still deciding who would vanish next. If this story shook you, understand this. It wasn't just about one prison, one gang, or one corrupt warden. It was about a system that learned how to hide crime in plain sight. And if you think this was intense, you're not ready for what comes next. Stay close. Subscribe, because the next story is already unfolding.